time to write a book. It's time to write a book. We've been doing this. We've been selling short stories. It's been going great. Wonderful. But I really want to write a book. I've been dying to write a fantasy for my whole life, and I didn't even know it. And I was so ready to do it. And Stone and Sky was born, right?
Readers, this is your host Charity with Booktrovert Reader Podcast. I have an exciting guest with me today. His name is Z.S Diamanti. That's how he taught me how to do it. Diamanti, he is a fantastic indie author that wrote Stone and Sky. It's an epic fantasy that he has written this year and published. It's out now. So I would love to introduce him to you guys and tell me and the readers about yourself.
Hey, what's going on, guys? As Charity said, I'm Z.S Diamanti. You guys can call me Zach. That's what most people call me when we're out and about. That's what most people call me, or Dad, because most of the people that talk to me are just my kids. But whatever. I spend a lot of time in this room right here, where you see all these books, and at this desk because I spend a lot of time writing or working on writing stuff. So. I am a fantasy author, as you know. Stone and Sky, woohoo! Epic fantasy adventure just came out in August 29th this year. Super excited about that. And book 2 is already done. We've got a test print that we are going through right now. We're putting all our little sticky notes, finding all the little formatting errors that we got to fix for the final copy. And that one is almost done. So we're getting ready to publish that in February, which is super exciting. And then book 3 in the trilogy is complete in June. It comes out the first week of June. So I'm a little, let's see, I'm 2/3 of the way through the first draft of that one, and we'll obviously go through all our rounds of editing before June. But hey, we're already trucking along. So if you're ready to go on an adventure, let's go, right?
So I'm assuming, are you considered a fast writer? Because that's pretty quick, or unless you had all these books written before you start publishing.
So I'm not necessarily a fast. So I had a conversation with another indie author the other day, Andy Peliquin. I don't know if you guys know who he is. He does the Dark Blade Assassins series and Dragon Bladed Assassins series. He's another fantasy guy, and we were talking about, how fast he writes. He writes, he can write like 200,000 words of book in 2 months or something, like crazy. This guy's crazy. He's so fast. Where I'm like, I could get my 120,000 word fantasy in about two and change months. Okay. So like, I'm not as fast as he is. I wouldn't say I'm fast. I'm probably not the slowest out there, but I wouldn't say I'm fast. Frankly, I had Stone and Sky was actually done back in December of last year. And I just waited all the way until August 29th this year to publish it in order to, set up a good foundation for us to launch off of.
Right. You wrote Stone and Sky. You got the second one coming out soon.
Stone and Tide.
Stone and Tide.
Yes.
And how long have you been writing fantasy in general?
Sure. Yeah. So it started way back when, when I was a kid. And actually I didn't have glasses as a kid, but I really needed them. So I hated reading. Like I couldn't read. Like it was bad. And until a teacher put The Hobbit in my hand. And I was so dialed into that book. It didn't matter how many times I reread a line. I could not stop. And I read all the way through that book and I was like, I love it. I want everything like this in my life. And I think the next week I wrote my first story called The Flobbit. Very original. Super original. And it was about this monkey creature who got to go on an adventure. And so anyways, that has since been buried or burned or lost in some sort of of
The
trash
dark web,
heap
as far as
somewhere.
we know.
Yeah, right. And and that was really my start with fantasy, right? But really, when I joined the Air Force, so I was in the Air Force, and I joined the
Okay.
Air Force. They were like, "Dude, you need glasses," and I got glasses, and all of a sudden I could read and I could see, and I was like, "Wow! Like, is this what everybody else could see?" Like, it was amazing. And so I started reading everything I could and just devouring everything, especially like classic stuff like Edgar Rice Burroughs, like with Tarzan and John Carter of Mars, and all these old school things. And it was so glorious and wonderful. And when I came back from Afghanistan, it was like there were some things that I went through that changed me, and I
Mhm.
really needed a different outlet because I'm an illustrator and drawer, but I
Right.
needed a different outlet, something to let my words out. And so I started writing, and I started writing stories and articles and horror stories and kind of like the whole gambit, right?
Right.
Got, sci-fi stories, kind of everything. But recently, in the last 2 years, I was like, it's time to write a book. It's time to write a book. We've been
Right.
doing this. We've been selling short stories. It's been going great, wonderful. But I really want to write a book. I've been dying to write a fantasy for my whole life, and I didn't even know it. And I was so ready to do it. And Stone and Sky was born, right?
Right. Just no big deal. The Flobbit. The Flobbit.
Yeah, far cry from the Flobbit to Stone and Sky. Thank goodness.
And now, like every time I see it, it's like the Flobbit guy.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah,
So, what I really liked about reading Stone and Sky was that it reminded me a lot of Lord of the Rings, and because of the
yeah,
journey, orcs, goblins, and all that fun stuff. And you got your main character who reminded me of Aragorn. And not saying you poached the story, but like I'm
sure, sure,
assuming that's kind of like where you got some of your inspiration from was the Lord of the Rings.
sure. Yeah, Lord of the Rings played a huge part in my life, again,
Right.
because The Hobbit was, like, the first book I read that I, like, actually loved and actually genuinely made it
Right.
through and enjoyed, right? In fact, it made me enjoy books to the point where, like, I went and read, like, The Old Man and the Sea, and I loved it. But it was still such a struggle for me to read growing up. So my reading repertoire was very small. And so what we
Okay.
ended up doing was me and my brother, we shared a room for years and years and years, right? Bunk beds and everything.
Okay.
And
And you're
we
still
would stay
alive.
up at night. Yeah. And we would stay up at night, and we would tell each other stories, right? And it was
Hmm.
like our own homebrew D&D, like sleepover D&D, right? Or whatever, right? And so that's where a lot of storytelling came in. But then as I grew and I got glasses and I started reading all these other books, I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much more out here. But I always have those like roots with like Lord of the Rings and epic classic
Right.
style fantasy. That's
Hmm.
really what I wanted to bring across, is that kind of classic style fantasy in
Right.
the Stone and Sky series.
Yeah, because I was when I was reading it, I was like, "Wow, this sounds like that classic style fantasy you mentioned." I was like, "Wow, that reminds me so much of that," and it's told in a very unique way that I enjoyed, in which is the multiple POVs, and we even got
Yeah.
perspective of like a goblin and an orc, and I think it's an
Yeah.
orc.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Whoa," even though these are the bad guys, you gave them a character and a personality. So I
Totally.
really, really enjoyed that because of the Lord of the Rings fan. I was like, they're always like not the subject, but they're the protagonist per se. So, and here's a random
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
Um, do you think they did the Hobbit movie justice for the book?
All right. This is a loaded question. So,
Uh-oh.
all right, all right, all right, all right, all right. So here's what I'll say. I'll say that the extended edition of the Hobbit movies is far, 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 far superior to the regular edition that they put out. To be honest,
Right.
I've only watched the extended edition of The Hobbit recently. Like, I think it was last year was the first time
Okay.
we've loved the extended editions of Lord of the Rings, whatever. But The Hobbit, we were always kind of like, it's just is okay. It's all right. It's all right. But boy, I tell you what, we got the extended editions and we were like, this is way better. Like, why didn't they just make this the regular edition? Because this is so much better. So no and yes. No on regular edition. Yes, they did much better on extended edition. And actually my kids and I, we listen to audiobooks in the car on the way to school. And we've been listening to The Hobbit, and Andy Serkis does the reading of it. And my son's just
Uh-huh.
losing his mind. He's like, "Oh my gosh, he sounds just like Gollum." And I'm like, "Dude, he like is Gollum." Like, you didn't like try to explain that it's not like process. He's like, his impression is so good. And I'm like, yep, it is. It is. So hopefully I don't get burned for that extended edition. Okay, guys, settle
Hey,
down.
I like the
Jeez.
Lord of the Rings extended edition. So much better
Oh,
than the
so
regular
good.
one, I discovered
Ah,
it.
chef's kiss. Totally agree. I mean, we do it
So
every Christmas break. It's like we'll watch all 6 of them, and it's like, I mean, it's like 20 something hours. It's like a whole day. It's ridiculous.
I didn't rewatch, but I was calling the old person card and fell asleep for the first one, so I gotta get my act together.
Yeah, in fairness, it happens to me too, because I know all the lines, so you're like, and then you're back
I
up and
already
you're
know what
like, I
happens at
already
the
know
end.
where we are. I still know where we are. We're good.
How they went, Aragon. Woohoo.
Yeah, right.
So going back to the book, we deviated
Yeah,
just a bit. What inspired you to write the multiple POVs of
yeah.
with the goblin and orc and everything? Because I thought that was a fun way to tell a story of even the bad guys.
Yeah, right. And so in Stone and Sky, especially you're coming into it, they are this ominous bad guys, right?
Right.
All the people, all the humans are talking about them, and it's very clear that these guys are the bad guys, right? These are who the Griffin Guard protects us from, right?
Right.
Is the wyvern riding orcs of the north. But I love world building, and I love the idea of um, people coming together, right? And so I knew
Right.
that the theme of the book was going to be hope, right? This hope for something better, right? And
Mhm.
especially over the last few years, we've seen a lot in our real world. There's been a lot of division and things, and I wanted to write something that just brings everybody together. Like, it brings peoples together that shouldn't technically be together, or like that in their brains, in their minds, it doesn't make sense for them to be together, right? And
Right.
so in order to do that, I had to make the goblins and the orcs and the trolls, like this whole nation of people, right?
Right.
They couldn't just be these monsters in the north. They couldn't be just these monsters in the mountains. They had to be people with families and with lives where they interact, and they cook, and they have food, and they have their own culture, and they go and they enjoy glorb wine, this new wonderful drink that this goblin's come up with, right? This entrepreneurial goblin who just wants to go out and make it rich, right? Like, I wanted them to be real people, right? And
Right.
so it was so much fun to really play with that, because it got to be so different, right? And it was something I wanted to do, like, right from the outset. So I knew I had to start with Orin and his the loss of his squadron. I knew that's where we
Right.
had to start, because that's where the journey was going to begin, right? And that's how we were going to get to explore the rest of the world of Finlandia, because we had to go on a journey. Man, we could throw everybody on Griffin back and they fly over there, and they're there in a couple of days, and boom, we're done, right? Like, the story's over.
Right.
Oh, there it was, right? No, we had to, no, it's got to be hard to get there. So we need this journey to get there. but we get to play with all these other characters and all these other cultures because they're running into these different people groups. And then, of course, everything all comes together towards the end. And, we got to bring all these different people groups and all these different POVs to the same place, which was really fascinating.
Right. Yeah, because we were getting to the point where at least where I was at is that they just suddenly it's like, what do you want to say to not ruin anything? Um,
I
I
know,
think
it's
they
like,
just
how do I talk without spoilers?
yeah, because you got little nuggets in there that makes this story very compelling to keep going because you don't throw your cards
Yeah,
all at once. You have to like keep going on the journey with them to kind of understand some things. And so I'm
yeah.
like, So where I was at was they started attacking each other and everything. Oren and his group
Yeah,
against the
yeah.
goblin. I wish I gotta wrote his name down because it's such a unique name, and need a how would you say it? Like a glossary or something.
Yeah, oh, right, yeah, I
Oh,
know, I probably should have done
Karnak,
that at the end
Karnak.
of the book. Yeah, right, right. Karnak is our main orc, right? The main
Right.
orc that we follow through the book, right?
Yeah, and I don't know why, I just, like, glued Karnak because he's supposed to be the bad guy, like you said,
Yeah,
but he's so human or in his culture, and you
yeah,
created such a personality, I instantly, like, latched onto him
yeah,
more than Orin did,
yeah,
so,
right.
sorry.
No, 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 and I think that's great. So one of the most fun things that I found with this book is because I got to write so many different POVs, right?
Right.
It really was in this, basically in all the books is how it worked out is, we're following this group because they're going somewhere, and this group's going somewhere, and this group's going somewhere. So each POV kind of jumps from group to group, right? And even in the
Mhm.
second book and the third book, we have different POVs because this group is over here. They're doing something different than this group is, right? And so we got to keep track of
Mhm.
where everybody is. And one of the really, really cool things about doing it that way and having these multiple POVs is you get to be personal with these
Mhm.
different characters. And it's been so fascinating to hear from different people who their favorite characters are, because like they didn't even expect this character was going to be one that they were going to get so close to throughout
Mhm.
the book. They didn't even expect this character. It has been so fun. And I think that was because that was so fun to do. I actually wrote the prelude stories. So this one here, the Stone and Sky Preludes collection. I actually wrote the prelude stories for all these characters uh, after I wrote the first book, because I had
Okay.
so much fun writing with all these different characters that I was like, man, it would be so much fun to jump in with this character and jump in with this character and write with this character and write with this character. It would be so much fun to do that. So I ended up writing 7 of them, like about different characters that you meet in the series, right? So it the that has been one of the most fun things, is people telling me which character is their favorite, because yeah, Oren's name is on the back of the book, right? It's the, he's the lone guardian, the lone survivor of his squadron. But man, there's so many other wonderful characters that people get to know, right?
Yeah, which is surprising because you don't when you read the back of the book, Orin, right? And then you suddenly just
Yeah.
swap to the orc and you're like, "Wait, I like
You're like,
that."
oh, okay, where are we going here? Yeah.
So, yeah, I instantly got attached to Karnak because of
That's
that
great.
reason, so just saying, people hopefully that doesn't ruin for people because that for me, that was a nice surprise and
I
I
love it.
loved it.
I loved writing the good guys, the bad guys, everybody in between. Man, and in the second book, Stone and Tide, I'm just telling you, there's maybe a villain or two in there that people
Oh, you're gonna actually write
may
them as a villain, or you're
may
gonna make me feel,
really,
like, bad
really.
for this villain?
I don't know. You're gonna have to. I would just leave it at that. Let's just say there's a villain that I've gotten some really positive feedback on.
Oh, okay. So you're gonna be an author villain, and you're just gonna leave me hanging. Alright, okay, I see how it is.
I'll send you one.
So
Don't worry.
okay, okay.
I won't leave you hanging that bad.
Well, I'm just glad that you are kind of, in a way, rapid releasing these books. You're not
Yeah.
letting us hang on it for a whole year before you're releasing the next book. What made you
Yeah.
decide on that kind of speed of releasing your books like that?
Yeah, so I took that bullet for you guys, for everybody else. Like I said, I finished Stone and Sky, in December of last year, right?
Right.
And I but at the same time, I also recognized that I had work to do on the author platform side to really build up
Mm.
and
Oh, yeah.
prepare for a release. So, as much as I know so many authors that, my book's done, released, done. And I'm like,
Right.
I really had to focus and decide what I wanted to do. I didn't want to just write one book. I didn't want to just sell one book. And that's fine
Mhm.
if that's what people want to do, but that's a different goal altogether.
Right.
Writing one book and selling one book is a different goal altogether than having an author career, right? A long
Right.
term, I want to write books for the rest of my life. I want to
Yeah.
write books that will just bring joy and adventure and wonder into people's lives for the rest of my life. I don't want to just do it once. And so I really had to be patient. I had to play the patient game so that
Ooh,
nobody else
okay.
did. So I had to play the patient game. Book's ready in December, but it's not coming out until August 29th because I have to build the foundation and get myself ready for that release. I mean, that was building website, starting a TikTok. I started a TikTok back in February, right? And we've
Mhm.
grown so much since then. And by the time Stone and Sky came out, we had like 20,000 followers on TikTok, and we were having so much fun, right? And it was so exciting. Uh, you know, it, I had to build all those things. I had to build a readers list. I had to actually establish and build a foundation so that I was ready to be the best author I could be for everybody else. And then, of
Mhm.
course, Stone and Sky released. I was already done writing the first draft of Stone and Tide, which is wonderful. I'm pretty sure almost, let's see, we'll be going into final edits for uh I almost got a slip
Mm,
there.
ooh. I was
We'll
like,
be
"Oh,
in
I'm writing
final
down."
edits. We'll be
Just tell
in
me the ending.
final edits for book 3. Uh at the same time, Stone and Tide is coming out in February. So we're continually making progress, getting people ready, and having the books ready for everybody in a timely manner, so that you don't have to live with those cliffhangers forever.
Yeah, one of those authors. No, just here. Here. Would you say that any of your characters was inspired by anybody in your life, by you, because you say that you have a military background,
Sure.
so that was helped you a little bit with, or a lot, whatever you tell me,
Yeah.
with just the things that happened in the book and the military sequences and things like that. So tell me
Yeah.
about all of that fun stuff.
Yeah, sure. So I actually grew up in a military family. My dad was in the Air
Okay.
Force before I was in the Air Force, and so um, he had a different job than I did. I was Air Force medical, and he did different stuff, airplane stuff, and then communications. But I grew up in an Air Force family, so my entire life I've been surrounded by military aircraft. And so
Okay.
I've always been fascinated by it, right? And it's been something I've loved. We'd always identify the different planes we saw, like whenever they're flying over, right? And I thought to myself, I haven't read a whole lot of fantasy books that have aerial combat and that kind of thing in it. And I was like, it'd be really cool if like this whole world, like all the different races and groups of peoples had like their different, you know, aerial steeds, right? Like, so we got griffins
Mhm.
for the humans, and we got wyverns for the orcs, and we've got pegasi for the elves, right? And we've got these things called garvox, which are these uh, panther-like creatures with giant bat-like wings, and they're just so fascinating. Like the lore I've put together for these garvox is so cool. And for the dwarves, and their magical bonds, and each of them have different abilities, right? And so with this aerial combat, there was there was a lot of inspiration there because, different airplanes have different, abilities and capabilities and all that. But then also having been in the military myself and done the things that I did and been to Afghanistan and doing those things, there were areas for me to go deep in loss and grief and heartache and what it feels like to be away from the fight. So for Oren, he's lost his whole squadron and he's just motivated to get back. Like all he wants to do is get back. But while he's getting back, he's in this relationship with these other characters who are actually teaching him that there's actually a little bit more to life than what he thought there was. Right. And so, but it's a hard lesson to learn because this is what he's known. This has been his whole life. So he's just trying to get back. Right. But he's learning these things and he's going, actually, maybe there is more and maybe we could be better. Right. As the Griffin Guard. So that's what he's learning through the process of the first book. And there's so many things I want to go into for the second book, but we're not going to go there. We'll just leave that.
We do have a time limit.
We'll do that for the next time. But because of my background, there were just so many deep emotions that I was able to draw on, especially, from the family perspective, when you're talking about Karnak or from Merrick. Merrick is a character that we get some time with that he's got this quiet wisdom, this quietness to him, this stillness that I have found over years since my time in the military. Right. So there are so many elements that I got to pour out into these different characters. And I mean, we'd be here all day probably trying to list them and pinpoint them all, right? It'd be a psychological, fascinating psychological study.
So, yeah, because now that you described that with the Air Force and the different air transportations basically in the book, I'm like, oh, okay, that's a good, interesting connection. I didn't put that two to two together until you mentioned that. So I can see how that is heavily inspired as well. So, you're not in active right now as we speak, right?
No, I wouldn't be able to have this crazy hair.
Oh yeah,
if I was. No, those days are long gone for me now.
So you are pursuing writing full time, correct?
Yep. So just about a year ago, a little over a year ago, September of last year. So it was about 1 year from when I quit my job to when Stone and Sky was released. And basically that whole year was just prepping and getting ready for Stone and Sky to come out.
Right.
And like I told you, it was like December. And I can't even tell you how many months were hard months where I'm working my tail off, working hours and hours and hours every day, really trying to make something happen. Right. It's set it up for success. Right. And it was, I can't tell you how painful it was, how many times the temptation of just publish it. Then at least some people will be buying it and then you'll know if it's any good. You'll know if people even like it. Like it's just so painful to go through that process for so many months and wait to publish it. But since publishing, I mean, it has been the level of support and love for Stone and Sky and for me as an author have been just baffling. We posted, literally today, we made a video because we just sold on the TikTok shop. It was our 500th order for an autographed Stone and Sky on the TikTok shop, right? And the TikTok shop's not our only place where we sell the books, but it was like, this is a crazy milestone for when a year ago, back in February, nobody even knew who I was. Nobody even knew I was an author, right? And nobody even knew I was writing a book. Nobody knew that this dream, this thing was just on my computer, right? Like it was in my brain and on my computer, right? In my heart and on my computer. And it has been just unbelievable. I have been so grateful. I've been humbled completely by the outpouring of support for Stone and Sky, and it has been just phenomenal. Now, I can't take some of the illustration jobs that I was doing. I was doing side illustration jobs
Okay.
to, make ends meet, make things happen. But recently, I've had to turn things down because I'm like, I'm sorry, I actually don't have time and I can't. This is taking over and it's amazing and it's a wonderful problem. And it's so, so great. And I've been so thankful.
Did you illustrate your own book covers, or did you hire that out?
I didn't actually. So I actually I hired a painter to paint the
Okay.
covers. I did all so these beautiful paintings are just phenomenal. My painter's name is Katerina Strokach. She is phenomenal. But I had her do the paintings, and then I just did all of the lettering and all the
Mhm.
graphics and all the extra stuff that you got to do for books. But luckily, thankfully, I'm somebody who knows how to do that stuff, so that worked out great,
Right.
right? But I wanted a different style than my own illustration style for the book covers,
Uh-huh.
so I went out for that.
Okay. Did she send it in a digital form, or did you actually get the painting itself?
No, she paints digitally, so yeah, I got the
Oh, okay,
digital
okay.
copies.
So
Yeah.
it's good. I'm still learning the whole arts
Yeah.
because, digital paint, and then there's like actual paint with acrylic. So I was like, let
Right,
me
right.
clarify.
Yeah, yeah. She's a digital painter. She's great. I mean, just I had her do the Preludes collection as well, and
Yes, I love
I
that.
wish I
Yeah.
had my proof copy of Stone and Tide is around here somewhere. Somebody's reading it, finding all of the formatting errors. So otherwise, I would show it to you. But I mean, she's already painted Stone and Tide and the cover for book 3, and those things are already done, which is just phenomenal. I love having those done and ready, and it makes life so easy, knowing that those are done. I was talking to her just yesterday about the next thing I need painted from her, and we're already talking about some of the other books coming after that. So
Mhm.
it's very exciting. I love working with her. One of my favorite things about doing the business side of the book stuff has been
Uh-huh.
meeting all the people and getting to work with these people who are doing really neat things. I just the other day, signed a contract with our narrator for the entire trilogy,
Ooh,
and
okay.
he is phenomenal. He's not somebody that most people have heard of, and his work is going to be so good. Like, I mean, the audiobooks are going to be off the hook. Like, they are going to be so cool because he has done it brilliantly. For example, I sent him samples of, Cole and Azil and Orrin and these guys all talking together. And then I sent him, a sample for Karnak and Smarlow when they're talking. And dude, his Karnak is like on point, like exactly how it sounded in my head. So it is legit. It's going to be so good. And he even
So
did a sample of Herndon and Nira, which was really exciting. So just saying, some of that romantic tension and stuff is ah he's gonna do such a good job.
let's get into the nitty-gritty of publishing because
Yeah,
that's a lot of people that I talk to is indie authors, and they always have
sure.
their hot take about what's the hardest about publishing. And so far, I feel like you're enjoying every aspect. And I don't even know if you have a negative thing to say about it, but I'm going to ask you anyways. Do you have like something that you had to overcome through this whole process of
Plenty.
indie publishing?
Yes, Plenty. So because I've done illustration and I've done a lot of graphic design and stuff for my whole life,
Uh-huh.
I love things to be pretty, right? I love
Right.
things to be
Okay.
pretty. I want them to be pretty. And so sometimes I get in trouble because the perfectionism thing, right? And so
Right.
the book cover and the words and the font, and I want, I want the headers over every, chapter, and I want the map to be beautiful, and I want it to look so good when you open it up that you're like, oh wow, I can't wait, right? And so some of those things required some finagling and
Deepening.
some learning, going through the process. I probably printed 10 um, test prints of Stone and Sky. For comparison, I printed 3 test prints for Stone and Tide because I learned so much from the process in the first round that I was like, oh, okay, great. Now I don't have to do that because I already messed up and did that. Like I don't have to go there, right? So it's not been all puppy dogs and roses, right? There's definitely been some things to learn. But I would say currently one of the hardest things for me right now is figuring out how to I've figured out how to do all sorts of different things through social media and that kind of thing. But there's also this element of, selling on Amazon and starting to build up sales and working that algorithm there. And unfortunately, it's like you have to be there because that's where everybody
Mhm.
shops, right? So there's a lot there that I'm still learning and trying to figure out. Um, but I'm also a learner. And so I took that year where it was like, look, I'm not going to publish this thing until August 29th. That's when it's going to come out. So I got a year to figure this thing out as best as I can. And I just went and learned everything I could. And sometimes it was hard. Sometimes it was easy. Sometimes I messed it up 14 times before I got it right. There was so much to it. There was so much work and dedication to learning the process, learning the behind the scenes things to figure out how to do it right, that it took me basically the whole year, right? So I released the Stone and Sky Preludes collection the month before, so in July, uh,
Mhm.
as a surprise, because once I figured out all the things on the when I was setting up Stone and Sky, I was like, actually, I could do this now. This isn't as bad as I thought. Now that I know how to do this, let's go ahead and do the Preludes collection. So I put together that. I mean, these are stories that I was giving away for free. Like, hey, join my readers list. You get 7 stories about these characters that you're going to meet in the Stone and Sky series. It's so much fun. Let's jump in, right? But people were enjoying it so much, they were asking me if I was going to have a hard copy of it. And I was like, I don't know. And then sure enough, I was like, actually, I can do this. And so I put together a hard copy and put it out. And people were so glad. They were like, oh my gosh, this is so great. Thank you for doing this. And I was like, great. This is wonderful. I'm glad you enjoyed it that much. Right. So there were plenty of hard things. For me personally, the hard thing right now is the Amazon side of things that I'm trying to figure out and do better at.
Right.
But everybody's got their stick, right? Their little thorn.
Right.
What's the hard part for you,
Mhm.
right? And so
Yep.
for me, that's the area that I'm working on.
It just sounds to me that since you were patient, you were
Yeah,
able to make those mistakes and learn from them, and then
totally.
enjoy the process at the same time. Like, you're not,
Sure.
like, wanting to quit in the process. I mean, you may have,
Oh
but
yeah. There were
but
days.
there were days. I'm not saying
Yeah.
you're inhuman
Yeah,
here.
there were days. Let's be
Cyborg
real.
author writer.
Oh man. No doubt.
So
There were some days. There were some hard conversations about finances and the budget around here
right, and
during
that's
that year. So, no, totally agree that being patient that honestly, that's probably the biggest advice I can give to anybody starting
mm,
out. Be patient because oh my
right.
gosh, if I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna publish this in February last year, or this year," right? and I finished it in December. Are you kidding me? All the things that I had to learn and fix and break and then fix and then learn and then fix and then break and then fix, all the things that I had to go through and learn, I would be way behind, because you hear so many times, and this is a sad thing. I hate to hear this, because you hear so many times authors, hey, I published my book, or I published my book and nobody bought it. I got 3 book sales and nobody read it, and not even my mom, right? And frankly, my mom wasn't even one of the first people that bought it, right? I, I, I probably only gave her one like a month ago, right? 2 months ago, maybe.
Oh, by the
But
way.
yeah, but point is, you feel so bad because you hear all these guys or ladies that, they publish their book, but nobody bought it. Well, yeah, because you didn't do all the foundational work, right? You didn't do
Mm,
all of this stuff to get ready for the release. You just
right.
released. And I get it. You're so excited. You just want to publish it. You're like, I've been working on this book forever. I'm so excited for it to finally be done. I'm ready to get it out there. But that's not how it works, right? That's not how the game works.
Right.
So that's tough. But being patient, I credit being patient to a large majority of the success that we have seen over the last 3 months. So
Right. I
crazy.
like that advice because I've heard like similar things as well. Don't
Yeah,
always rush to publish just because
right.
of that fact. I'm more of like the editing side of things, making sure
Totally.
it's, the grammar's right, the story flows right. But that is another side of the story I've never heard before was the fact that, hey, build that foundation to people know who you are, build that anticipation, and then release.
Totally. Yeah,
And then you're already in that, your patience has shown on TikTok and your shop and things like that the reward of that patience.
yeah,
So I love that because your work shows for itself, as
right.
a debut offer.
And
So
it's been wonderful, and I've been to so many, I've been to author conferences and other things
mhm.
this year, and I'm talking to other indie authors, and they're like, "Dude, how are you doing what you're doing?" And then it was like, I'm just like, "Dude, I set it up. I
Right.
set it up. I spent time to set it up, and it's not too late. You got your book out there, no, and you're struggling a little bit. Okay, let's put a pause on it. Let's figure out the most important things that we have to set up. Let's build that
Mhm.
foundation, and then continue to go re-release or whatever. Like do a, hey, it's so excited. This book has been out for 2 years. I can't even believe it. Anniversary. Let's do that. Right. It's not
Mhm.
too late, but the patience is so key for you to actually set everything up for that success.
Really good. I will have to say because I wanted to tell you when I saw this. Thank you for putting title chapters.
Yes,
You
yes.
named all your chapters. I know that's
I
random, but I was like, I
did.
have to
I
tell him.
did. Um, I did actually. You know what's so funny? I didn't actually do that. Uh,
Ooh, okay.
I didn't actually do that originally. So when it
Okay.
was done in December, I didn't have chapter titles. It wasn't until I started writing Stone and Tide that I was like, no, I've got to have chapter titles, because I was writing Stone and Tide, but like I was also in the middle of my final editing, right? And so I'd already been in through 3 rounds of edits, and I've got all these different editors talking to me about, chapter this, chapter that. I'm like, I have no idea what chapter, like I don't know what's happening in that chapter. I don't know. There's like certain chapters, like chapter 9, I remember what happens in chapter 9, right? That's a big deal, right? But like I don't remember. So if you haven't read it, sorry, chapter 9. Good luck. Have fun. But like there's, like okay, I remember things like that. But like you're talking to me about chapter 22. What's in chapter 22? I don't really remember. So it's not even for everybody else. It was for me. So I go back, I pause. Okay, pause. We're not writing Stone and Tide right now. We're going back and we're going to write chapter titles for every chapter in book 1, and then we'll continue it from there. I had to do it so that I could remember what chapter we're talking about. So now that they all have names, I named them all something that I would remember what was going on in that chapter. So you're welcome. Happy accidents. We'll take it,
Okay.
right?
Happy accident. We tackle a lot of some of your best tips for indie authors, which I love what you're sharing. Every single time I jump with an author, they always have something really good. It's not the same, never the same.
Well,
Um,
everybody's like path to it is
yeah,
different, right?
right.
I know how to do illustration and graphic design, so I paid half as much for my cover than most other people do.
Mhm.
That part was easy for me. That part is great. Some people are like, man, my cover, getting the cover was the most painful part of the process, right? It's just different for everybody.
For everyone. Yep.
Everybody comes at it
So
with their own skills, right? And their own knowledge, right? So it's pretty
Right.
interesting.
So I came across your book, obviously on TikTok, which is your main platform
Sure.
because a lot of people are trying to break into that. What would you say
Yeah.
is how you built your platform from the very beginning to
Yeah.
get your people to interact with you?
Sure. Yeah. You can actually go back, and if people want to, I mean, you don't have to, but you can go back all the way to my posts back in February, and you can watch a distinct transition over time where
Right.
when I started on Book Talk, I didn't post for a couple of weeks. I made an account in February, and I didn't post for several weeks. What I did instead for the first 2 weeks was train the algorithm by searching on my account. And I
Mm.
search 3 times a day for 10 minutes. I was in there searching uh, all things fantasy book talk, or fantasy books, or classic fantasy, or epic fantasy, or any combination I could think of, right?
Right.
To make sure that TikTok, the algorithm, understood what my account was about. So by the time I was ready to
Mm.
actually post anything, now I was, interacting with different fantasy authors that were writing books that are similar in style, or their classic style, kind of, more about the adventure and the journey kind of books, right? And I was interacting with these guys, and so I was actually getting followers, just from interacting with some of these people, right? Finding
Mm.
book talkers
Okay.
who talk about fantasy books, classic style fantasy books, right? So I was actually gaining a few followers just from that, and I hadn't even posted anything, right? But what I was doing was I was training the TikTok algorithm to know that's what my account was about. So anytime I would be on the For You page and it came up with anything that wasn't fantasy bookish related, swipe,
Mhm.
swipe, swipe, get away as fast as possible, so that TikTok knew that my account was only about fantasy book talk kind of things. So then when I finally posted my first video, it's a dorky video. It's a goofy, it was like Jennifer Lawrence saying like, hello, like, what do I do? Right? Like something like that, right? And
Right.
it's literally just me standing in front of my bookcase, like, hello, what do I do? And it's like, I put words on it that's like, when you're new to book talk, or when you're new to fantasy book talk and you're looking for your new fantasy besties, right? That was my first post. I posted another one that day as well, and overnight I had my first 1,000, which is your first goal, right? That's your first goal because
Right.
you want to be able to put a link in the bio, right? So now you can actually send people to your other stuff. Like, no, look, this is what I'm doing, right? Like, you want to go see
Right.
this, and that's your first goal, right? And I posted regularly. I mean, regularly. But I was posting things about fantasy book talk things, or like bookish things, fantasy things, all in the same vein, in that same genre, fantasy author things, all in the same space, right?
Right.
I didn't even start posting about my book until I want to say it was June.
Mm. Right. Okay.
And it obviously worked, and it's been great. And I still try to post things that have nothing to do with my book. I still try to post things about, you know funny bookish things or book talk or fantasy books, or like, hey, I just finished reading this great book. I just finished listening to the Dragon's Blade trilogy by Michael R. Miller, blah, blah, blah. Like all those things. I still try to post all those things because those are the things that engage people and they want to be around for. And then they're like, hey, you know what? I like you. You're fun. You're nice. What's your book about? And then they want to know rather than you trying to make them want to know, if that makes sense.
Right. Which, I'll just, because I'm hunting for the 1,000 TikTok followers as well, I'll probably take some of your advice for myself,
Do it. It's worthwhile.
So, okay. We got TikTok advice. Thank you, because I'm pretty sure a lot of people are like wandering the dark. So, any tips, anything that you want to share with anybody, or things that you took away from your experience of writing your first book and on to your next, like to share with the other listeners?
Oh gosh. So since we talked about, like building the foundation, being patient, right? You want to do all those things. You want to build your website, you want to build your newsletter, and you want to build a presence, a social media presence, right? Be where you can gather people, right? And TikTok's really good for that because they actually send your videos out to different people, not your followers, right? So if it was actually sending it to all my followers, I'd be getting 30 something thousand views on every video I posted. Woohoo, right? Great. But that's not how it works. It goes out to different people, right? So have a place to gather. And if TikTok's not your jam, no big deal. If Instagram's your jam, go for it. If YouTube's your jam, go for it. Use what's going to work for you to gather people, but have a place for them to gather. And that's your readers list and your website, right? Then since release, there's a couple of things I learned that were difficult, but important. And actually learn this before you even build your readers list. Your family and friends, most of them aren't going to care about your book. Sorry, I love you. They love you, but they're probably not going to care about your book for the most part. When they start seeing you do something like successful and you've got this following and you've got this other thing going, then they're like, oh, hey, let me get a copy of your book. Go ahead and you can buy it on my website, right? I mean, look, the fact of the matter is,
you had a chance.
Most of your family and friends, they're just not going to be. Nobody's going to be as excited about your book as you are. Period. End of story. Fact of the matter. Until people start reading it, and then they're really excited about your book, and you're surprised, and you're like, "Wow, you love it!" Like, oh my gosh, I love it too.
It's just not myself and I.
Yeah, I just thought it was me, right? And so, one of the hardest things to learn though is don't get down. You're gonna get negative reviews. You're gonna get trolls. You're gonna get all these other people that are just mean. Just be positive. Be loving. Be joyful. Be generous. This is your life, and this is the story that you want to tell. Tell the story you want to tell, because the fact of the matter is if you tell the story that everybody else wants you to tell, you're not telling your story, and you're not going to have as much fun. Period.
I love that. You are like the author guru. Or the Yoda, if you want to get Star Wars.
Yoda, hey, all right. So, have fun, you must.
All right. Well, just to wrap things up, just say where you can find your book, where we can find you as an author, because you're a very fascinating person, and I would love for everyone to start following you, to just follow your content and to get your book as well.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So you can get Stone and Sky pretty much anywhere. It's like on all the stores. But if you want an autographed copy, hit me up in the TikTok shop, or you can hit me up on my website at zsdiamanti.com. But also, I like to tell people, I always like to tell people and remind people that if you're not ready to jump in like right away, like I don't know if I want to buy it right away. Look, you can get the Stone and Sky preludes for free. I give them away to people for free in my readers list. You can get those at freefantasyfiction.com. It's super easy to remember. I was like, let's use some alliteration. That was just my writer brain getting fun. Freefantasyfiction.com. Super easy to remember. And right there, you can sign up for my readers list and you'll get 7 free prelude stories about characters that you're going to meet in Stone and Sky, and characters that, come back in the trilogy as you go on. So definitely something to jump into. And of course, I'm on basically all the social medias. So, but you can find all those links at my website, zsdiamanti.com.
And I will just be sure I'll put all those links up in the description of this podcast episode so you can find them easily, because Diamante,
Diamante, it's hard to read. Hey, that's the other reason why I went with freefantasyfiction.com because I was like, who's going to remember how to spell Z.S Diamanti? They're like, what is that? What are you saying?
You just doing these quick tips just to make it easier, not only just for readers, but just for you as yourself, right?
That's a good tip. Go for it.
Well, I appreciate so much that you jumped on this podcast as my guest, and I appreciate you sharing all your knowledge and your book with us. I wish there was more time, but I feel like
Yeah.
we have to end it someday. But
Yeah.
I really appreciate you
Someday.
joining.
Oh, well. Well, I really
We'll just
appreciate
have
it,
you
and
come on again.
we'll come back around and do it again another day, right? That's what
I
we
mean, you
can
got
do.
more
There you go.
series up your sleeve, so I have. We'll get you back on. So,
That's
well,
right.
readers,
That's right.
yep. Well, readers, thank you for listening to this podcast, and I enjoy talking to you all the things fantasy books. Definitely hit up on Z.S Diamanti with his new book, Stone and Sky, and just keep up to date with his new books that are coming out. So thank you, readers, and catch you later.
Bye, guys.